Welcome to Columbia Business School on a Friday morning. We're so glad that everyone here could make it. My name is Dan Wang. I'm the Lambert Family Associate Professor of Social Enterprise, and I also have the privilege of being the faculty co-director of the Tamer Center for Social Enterprise. And with our first panel, which I have the pleasure of moderating, and it's going to be a fireside chat with Karla Palmer, and she's with a manager at the AI for Social Good and Sustainability group at google.org, and we're excited to kick this off. So thank you so much, Karla, for joining us. Okay, so I lied. I have some more things to say. I'd love to tell you a little bit about Karla before we begin. How this session is going to go is I'm going to keep watch on time for all of us. Is that we'll have about 30 to 35 minutes for exchange, and then we'll turn it over to you for questions, if you have any, for the rest of the time that we have together. But let me tell you first a little bit about Karla. Karla is a manager of the AI for Social Good and Sustainability group at google.org, and that's Google's philanthropic arm. There she manages grant making for organizations leading AI interventions for food insecurity, maternal health, public benefits, access, and more. In addition, Karla also leads google.org's environmental justice grant-making arm, having launched the firm's seminal initiative, the Environmental Justice Data Fund. And that's a $9 million fund for frontline communities that have been historically underserved and disproportionately impacted by climate change and environmental degradation. Before managing Google's grant-making initiatives, Karla worked as a policy specialist at Google, where she helped shape the firm's policies on user protection and privacy. She's a DMV native, so she's from the East Coast. Karla holds an honors BA in political science and a certificate of advanced leadership studies from American University, and she's passionate about collecting, if it wasn't clear before, underserved communities to critical resources that help them achieve just outcomes and lasting change. So I'm really, really excited for this conversation. Before we get into a lot of the substance of what you do, maybe, and I think would be interesting for all of us to kind of understand here, especially for the students who are in attendance, to learn a little bit more about your career trajectory, specifically how you ended up leading the AI for Social Good and Sustainability team at Google. What choices or critical junctures can you talk about that remind you of this trajectory?
Yeah, I think growing up, especially in the DC area, I had always, coming from the family that I come from, I'd always been very interested in having a career in social impact. And I think being in DC, right, I think majority of my interests centered around government, working in the public sector. Upon starting my studies at American, I studied political science and business. I started to become very quickly sort of jaded by the politics, behind the politics itself. Having had a number of internships, everything from interning with my local congresswoman, working at the Department of Justice for a bit in their consumer protection branch as a paralegal, and just all sorts of different government internships. I also worked on campaigns. I was in New Hampshire for a couple weeks for Hillary, right? I did all of it. And I think after a while, I started to feel as if operating in the government sphere, I wasn't able to really see the impact of my work as immediately or in the short term as I would have liked. I think one example I always give is when I was a paralegal at DOJ, I had entered the branch after 4 years after a particular case had started, and the targets of our investigation hadn't yet been extradited, right? And by the time I left, they still hadn't been extradited, right? After all of the time that I spent working there. So I think I started thinking about ways that I could have the impact that I wanted, but be able to see results more in the short term. So I started looking into opportunities to work in social impact, potentially in the private sector. I think Management Leadership for Tomorrow, MLT, was a big influence in helping me see what those opportunities could be. One summer I ended up interning in public finance investment banking. They are really thinking about ways that we structure municipal bonds to help state governments be able to raise the capital that they need for large infrastructure projects, right? Very important, but not the most interesting work to me. And after moving on from that, I think was just sort of, thinking open to whatever sort of like private social impact intersection found me. So a recruiter from Google had reached out to me about a policy specialist role. And from there, I ended up working as a policy specialist there, thinking about ways that we structure our policies around privacy, user privacy, security, and I think very interesting work also, and I think allowed me to really see exactly all of the many inputs and very decisive, but also measured, decision-making that goes into creating policies that are fair and that really balance, compliance also with user rights and safety. Moving on from that, I did that for about a year, and then have been here on Google.org managing our AI for social good and environmental justice grant making for the past 3 years.
Your exposure to different sides of Google is something that I found so fascinating, because right now you're at Google.org, which is ostensibly separate. Of course, it has the Google umbrella over it, but it's a separate entity, makes its own decisions. But yet you also worked at Google, the company, Alphabet, the company that owns Google, and you had insight into impact in Google's products as well. There's so many questions I have about how your perspective has changed, moving from Google, the company, to Google.org, but maybe I can start by asking about your experience first with the company working on and affecting policies related to user privacy. And typically when we think about privacy in the tech sector, we associate that with Apple. Consumer willingness to pay is associated with privacy standards as set by Apple. That's the whole thing that Apple has made part of its value proposition as well. I'm wondering how you thought about it at Google, what the company thought about it, what influence you had over perhaps revising or approaching or underlining some of the different policies. How did you think about that in that role?
Yeah, I think in many ways, Apple is, from the consumer perspective, and many experts' perspective, the exemplar when it comes to privacy. But I do think being a hardware-first business makes that a bit easier than working in a company like Google that operates in a bunch of different realms, hardware, software, many others. And certainly even more difficult for a company like Meta, Facebook specifically, that's working in essentially regulating a town square, right? And then there's issues, of course, of like free speech and creating measured responses and what to take down, what not to. I think one of the things that our leadership during my time on that team that year that I was working there, but also I think very much now has continuously called for is really regulation in this space, right? And I think that regulation needs to be informed by consumer, by citizen perspectives, right? I think I can say for myself, like in that role, I don't want to have to make the call on what to take down and what not, right? I think, especially recently with, everything that we've seen with Twitter and Facebook, right? There, I think, are very differing opinions across a very wide spectrum of what is appropriate in terms of protecting both user safety, but then also managing sort of compliance, right? You, of course, want to ensure that any platform, any product, whether it be YouTube or Twitter or insert platform, is both allowing folks to have, users to have, creators to have license to express their thoughts, their opinions, create content that is like artistically true to whatever they'd like, but also at the same time makes the platform usable. And I can't say that we've found the answer to that. I think it really is decision by decision, right? Whenever there's certain content that pops up, I think we have a variety of indices that we have to consider about whether to take it down, whether to leave it up. And I think I direct folks also to our annual transparency report, where we write quite a bit about that as well.
This resonates with me so much right now this week, because in the class I'm teaching right now on technology strategy, we had a case discussion about Twitch, this live streaming platform. And the objective of that case was to talk about which moderation policy do you go with. And the very unsatisfying answer at the end of the case discussion is, well, it depends. And that's the best that you can do right now. And so in practice, it's very much a kind of a tricky issue. That's very informative in terms of thinking about what it's like from the Google perspective. You moved to google.org, that's where you've been since. And I wanted to ask you about a question that will, I hope, affect me in the sense that I can take a cue and some advice from you, which is that there are so many different kinds of issues and problems that you could address with the resources of google.org. And I know that with google.org, you're prioritizing support for organizations that specifically specialize in AI interventions. So how do you prioritize the different needs that come across your desk? Like, do you use a heuristic? Is there a framework that you think about it? Is it also case by case? How do you even begin to think about the wide, almost impossible range of questions that you could address?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I'd say generally we have a preference for a strong commitment to serving communities where we operate, right? Those are the communities where we receive the most benefit from a business perspective, and we think those are the communities that we should be pouring into the most. And then I think, another layer beyond that is we want to ensure that in the various regions, countries, locales that we operate in, that the issues, challenges that we're addressing are the ones that are most salient for the communities that live there, right? So for our Americas team, they're very focused on economic opportunity and cybersecurity across the Americas. In APAC, Asia Pacific, we're very focused on digital responsibility. Of course, there are many emerging markets across the region, lots of folks coming online for the first time. And I think my team, my grant making is global in nature and very much focused, of course, on emerging technology, AI, and data. And I think for us, especially this year, but always having been Google a very AI-first company, we want to ensure that the AI grant making that we do is very aligned with not just the core values that we have as a business around ensuring that AI is accessible to all, but also beyond that, that AI is the solution that is effective for any given problem. So I think there are a number of ways that we can think about this, but ultimately, I think having been, as you mentioned earlier, both in the Google side of the business, but also in the philanthropy, I've come to realize that a lot of our grant making is very much tied in a business perspective from the perspective that we should be giving back to the communities where we operate.
So I have a follow-up. This is a two-parter.
Yeah.
First part is I would love to hear if you have any examples of recent grants that you've made or examples of AI interventions that are either on your radar or part of your portfolio that you've thought about that you think are unique and impactful, because I think it would be useful for all of us to hear about what this actually looks like in practice. What is an AI intervention and how does it create equitable impact? So that's part one, examples. The second part is how do you evaluate that? And so when it comes to AI, there's so much noise about this. And so my question is, how do you then decide what are the right metrics? Maybe there are KPIs that you look to for the organizations that you fund. What does that look like in terms of evaluation? Are there certain dimensions that you think about in thinking this is a kind of a better, more effective, use of funding versus another criteria?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say remind me of the first question.
The first question is about some examples.
Examples,
Yeah.
yes, sorry. Well, just last week, actually, we had Google for India, where we announced quite a few grants. And one of the organizations that I'm particularly fond of, that we just made a $3.3 million grant to, is Wadhwani AI in India. They're an organization that we first funded back in 2019 through our AI Impact Challenge. And what they do is they leverage AI to diagnose different crop pests and diseases. And the way that they do that is using computer vision, right? So the process of this is essentially feeding an AI, a computer, a machine, a bunch of examples, pictures, images of what pests look like in any given plant. At the time when they first started, that crop was cotton. So this was through their Cotton Ace platform. And then based on these various examples that you fed the AI, it then makes a determination, diagnosis of what is the pest that is afflicting the particular crop. And I think that's one great example of computer vision at use. But I think also, when we think about positive use cases for AI and computer vision specifically, I think there's immense promise, so many great examples of computer vision being used for diagnostic imagery in the health space. So imagine, for example, all the time that physician time you could save by leveraging AI, computer vision, to be able to diagnose from medical imagery. So I think those are just a couple of examples, but also I think another organization, there's just so many. Another organization I'm also really fond of, Arman. They're an organization focused on maternal health in India. And really their mission there is leveraging AI to be able to predict which mothers are most likely to drop out of their maternal health programs. And then based on that prediction, they're then able to target those communities, those mothers, with a variety of very targeted measures to ensure that they're able to access those programs, whether it is providing on-ground transportation, if that's the reason that they're missing their appointments, being able to send, for example, community health workers directly to their homes to be able to evaluate them there. And I think, just the variety of issues that AI has the potential to potentially, drive progress towards is almost endless with the right guardrails and the right inputs, and of course with user buy-in.
So the follow-up to this, and I love that you ended with saying like the possibilities are really endless here. That is both a promise and an opportunity, but also an immense challenge as well, because of the noisiness, one could say. So when I teach about AI and social impact, I have to come up with a framework to bring order and structure to evaluating the effectiveness of AI solutions to social problems. Personally, I use a framework that I've just called FATE. It stands for something. So FATE, fairness, which is that the AI has an equitable solution and outcomes, accuracy, which means that it's effective in these prediction tasks, it's not completely off or completely random, transparency in that you know exactly what's going into the model and how it's calculating probabilities, and ethics, which is subscribing to a certain principle, and this is the hardest one, because everyone has different notion of virtue ethics. So can you share a little bit about the kinds of frameworks that you use? Because on the one hand, you did say that you prioritize certain types of social problems based on the communities where Google is, that you serve. But the other aspect, of course, is the effectiveness of the solution. How do you organizationally bring people together to evaluate those aspects jointly?
Yeah, so I think this balance here is that AI has immense immense potential for driving social impact, but AI isn't for everything, right? And we don't want to, and oftentimes, sometimes, I should say, we have organizations that are really excited about getting involved in experimenting with AI, but frankly, AI is not the solution that has demonstrated the most promise. It's really human touch, person-to-person interactions, right? And I think that's something, that we have to sort of have a way of detecting pretty early on. I think, broadly, one of the things beyond whether or not, first question, is AI really the right fit for this problem? Beyond that, I think we also want to be thinking, is this the right organization to be doing this work, right? Is this an organization that has established trust, partnerships, relationships within the community? Another question, I think, is around accessibility and availability of data, right? Because one stream of our work, which may come up a bit later, is funding investments in data, which can then have downstream impact of creating AI models. But when we're thinking about providing positive use cases of AI and funding them to scale, we want to ensure that the organizations have an existing data platform, infrastructure, body corpus that they can use, right? So that is also a good question. We also are always looking for in-house technical talent, right? Like, do you have a tech team, small or large? We can, of course, fund it to scale up, but like, does it exist? Are there folks that are willing and able to work on that development of an AI? And I think also, when we think about these solutions, we also are looking for scale and sustainability, right? So is this an organization that can scale this work to service a wide population, right? Armand, when we first started, they were a pretty small organization, one of very many maternal health organizations in India. And now we can, confidently say they're the leading, right? So I think that scale is important, and I think is also something that we want to ensure that like every dollar has however many excess dollars in impact, right? That every dollar that we're using to support these initiatives is helping to create like even broader impacts. And I think to the point of sustainability, we want to ensure that AI is a tool that isn't just to be used for this grant period, but is something that is deeply valuable to the organization and is something that is useful, frankly, in helping them do their work better.
You brought up something that I think often goes overlooked when folks who might not be in the weeds of AI technologies think about, and that's the importance of data. To the accuracy, but also to the validity of a lot of the models that are used for social impact purposes and for other purposes as well. And this is kind of a question about how you think about the application of AI, because a lot of what goes into AI models can produce immense promise, immense benefits that spill over into society. But at the same time, the creation of AI models can also mean that there's a social cost. One example is that when AI models are deployed for classification tasks, the data that's being input into these models have to be labeled. For example, you talked about identifying certain pests on crops. There has to be something and someone that labels this image as a pest, this image is not a pest. And on the one hand, that's drudgery, that's a lot of work, but and it seems like who would ever want to do that? On the other hand, there are people who do that. Yeah. And so there have been bits and pieces of news about how the building of AI models can result in greater inequality as well. How do you think about those types of questions? I know it's difficult, especially given the social promise, but how do you think about those kinds of questions?
Yeah, I think when you think about the potential inequalities, and not just potential, but the active inequality, right, that is being propagated through the creation of these models, or really before the creation, the labeling of these data sets. I think it's really important to ensure that the communities where these AI models are going to be deployed are actively engaged in that data creation in a way that is mutually beneficial, right? And I think one of our grantees that we funded through the Fast Forward Accelerator, Karya, also an India-based organization. I keep mentioning India-based organizations today, but Karya, what they do, I think, is an amazing work, and this is the way that I believe that data should be collected everywhere for AI models, is they essentially create bite-sized tasks for folks in rural villages across India, as well as cities, to be able to essentially read off words on a page. So, for example, if you're needing an AI model that is like voice to text, text to voice, they're then able to hear the pronunciation to train the model, right? And whether it's helping getting those folks to label text or voice, image, all of this is done, and all of the workers are compensated for their labeling of this data, right? And they've done really great work in partnering with a variety of tech firms, and I think that is a model that is, one, I think, incredibly scalable, and I think they're doing quite well, but is also a model that I'd like to see a lot of other tech companies, including Google, take up a bit more.
Yeah, it's a difficult set of issues because we don't have a good model for what this looks like, but I'm really glad and happy to hear that progress is being made, especially in the work that Google.org is doing. One of your signature accomplishments is the leading of the Google's Environmental Justice Data Fund. I'd love to hear more about the creation of that fund, your effort in kind of leading it, and what makes this effort unique among, say, other foundations that might have a similar type of goal. What was the story behind it?
Yeah, so back in 2021, I started having conversations with environmental justice leaders across the country, really to understand what were the problems and challenges that they were facing in accessing funding, organizationally, in terms of tackling environmental injustices. And one challenge that felt incredibly universal, constantly being risen up in these conversations, was really folks not having access to the data that they need to substantiate their claims, right? So, of course, there's one of our grantees, We Act, that actually operates near here in Harlem. An environmental justice group, do excellent work. You know that, for example, in your community in South Bronx and parts of Harlem, that like folks have higher rates of asthma, but you don't have the data to be able to substantiate that claim, for example, in your applications for funding to philanthropies or funding at the federal and state levels. And in the past, when you've seen legislation, climate legislation, come out that is meant to target communities that have been disproportionately impacted by climate and environmental injustice, it's tended to go to communities that have had the data to be able to substantiate those claims. So I think in response to that, we really wanted to ensure that we were providing organizations with the capital that they needed to be able to launch their own data projects. And really not just data projects, but like internal data capacity, right, that could be sustainable for these organizations. And I think recognizing also in those conversations, as far back as 21, was that there really existed a very wide spectrum of capacity, right? Folks that were really presenting needs around just like very basic data planning and collection, and folks that like were very much interested and prepared to engage in some advanced modeling, scenario planning, use of AI even. So I think in response to that, we really wanted to ensure that our approach was targeting this very diverse set of needs. So we ended up launching in 2022 the Environmental Justice Data Fund, $9 million fund to support organizations in grant sizes from $25,000 to $500,000. ended up funding 90 organizations across the country. And I think just really excited as we continue to like monitor their progress and think about ways that we can continue to engage beyond just capital, but also connecting them to opportunities. I think, what one of the hoped for back then, and I think now, and is something we're continuing to see outcomes, is that with the historic legislation that the Biden administration has finalized around environmental justice, both through the inflation bill and also through the Justice 40 initiative. I think it's really exciting to see the ways that this data will be useful in helping them to gain access to that funding.
That was really enlightening for me, in part because we think that in order to enhance the effectiveness of a social impact-oriented organization, that it's just money, that's all they need. But in fact, not all money is created equal. And in fact, the advice, the knowledge, the context that it comes with, especially data, that's what seems to be moving the needle. I have lots of questions about that, but I do not have time to ask all of them. So I wanted to ask one last question before turning it over to all of you, which is about kind of how you think about the future planning of your particular fund and projects at google.org, but also the organization in general, which is that what are perhaps the biggest opportunities that you see in the future? And probably what's also important for us to hear is what are the major constraints that you often bump up against in terms of making these decisions?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you didn't know then, you sure know now that Google is an AI first company. And I think even more than this year, I anticipate that even more of our grant making will be focused on AI. So while my team specifically is focused primarily on advanced applications of AI, scaled applications, I think there remains immense promise around building capacity for organizations downstream to be able to have access to leveraging the promise of AI. And I think, one of the ways that we think about this is we don't want tech companies to universities, right, like to be hoarders of innovation, right? We want to ensure that this innovation is accessible to others. So I think, as we think about planning for next year, I think one of the opportunities, but also a challenge, I'd say it's both, is ensuring that we're creating the right programmatic frameworks, the right set of supports to ensure that these organizations are able to have that access. So this year I actually led our research and then also our grant making, which is not yet announced, around our generative AI projects. And I think that is one example. Generative AI in a lot of ways is a lot more accessible to organizations than traditional AI models are. Right? So I think as we think about opportunities for sharing the benefits of AI, I think generative AI lends a ton of promise, and I think is something that I'm looking forward to leaning into a bit more next year.
Fantastic. I wish we had hours with you. I think it's time to turn it over to the audience. If anyone has any questions, I believe we have, I think we go till 9 to 10, 9:50. I will check. But we have time for questions.
Good morning. Very enlightening discussion. I have a higher level question. Google itself is a strong brand. How do you use that brand to bring people together, that power of convening, and not only kind of use your products to make a difference?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that we're constantly working towards. I think one way to succinctly describe it is we want to ensure that we are showing up, but that we're also bringing our grantees along at big global fora, right? So whether it be the UN Global Assembly is one that we often show up at, COP28, which will be happening later this year, and we also show up at every year, Davos, many others, but also I think There are a number of convenings at the state level that our policy teams are very eager to bring our grantees into, whether it's mayoral convenings, governors associations, et cetera, et cetera. I think the real promise of the brand is not just in convening, but from a capital perspective, is about de-risking solutions themselves and encouraging fellow funders to jump in the ring, right, when it comes to funding some of these organizations that are underfunded. And I think that's been especially the case in the Environmental Justice Data Fund, right, and environmental justice broadly, right, seeing the amount of opportunities that our grantees have been able to gain access to because we were able to be sort of like the first funder. So I think even beyond the convening power, I think there's immense power in the influence that comes with encouraging other philanthropies to also share capital in this way.
Could I ask a quick follow-up? I thought that was a great question about bringing folks together. It relates to something you said about asking other funds to perhaps join the effort as well. My understanding is that when a proposal is announced or a request for proposal is announced, a lot of the proposals are inbound.
Mm-hmm.
Do you also source organizations as well that you have identified, perhaps those that might not even be aware of programs like this? Like, how do you balance that?
For sure. I think it's definitely a huge balance, right? Like there are a number of open calls, right, where, or a number of so there's so much here. So there are a number of ways that we could source proposals. It could be through an open call, or it could be through just one-off conversations and organizations that we find, right? So one way, if I'm thinking about funding, an initiative right now, or I'd like to fund an initiative at the intersection of AI and insert global challenge, I'd go back to a variety of old open calls and organizations that we might not have selected in the past and revisit some of those organizations that are doing work in that space. But also speaking about other philanthropies, I think it's really important the relationships that we have in getting folks to share their applications with us, right? The applications they're seeing, organizations maybe that they didn't fund this time, but like maybe we feel differently about. So there is definitely a lot of going back to old open calls, but also lots of desk research, LinkedIn messages, chatting with folks, fellow funders also.
Other questions? We have time for other questions. There's a question over there.
Hi, I had a question. I think it's like a double click on the last thing Dan said, but I wanted to ask a question on how like OpenAI or the launch of ChatGPT has maybe changed your work, because like of course AI development has been going on for a long time, but for me, even in my job, it was once ChatGPT started, priority on AI wasn't just for the top digital strategy. It was communicated. Everyone at this organization needs to be thinking about it. And so I guess my question is more about, I know that's a focus on the LLMs, how that has changed the conversation in the social impact sector broadly, and then also, how you or your colleagues are thinking about it in terms of, is it a primary effect akin to the AI of the past? Is it secondary? Like, what does this mean for vulnerable communities, maybe in jobs? And then, also a kind of a meta effect. You said you wanted like regulation to be informed by consumer and citizen preferences. This is like kind of think like the first kind of product launch where, the mass is kind of like involved in interacting and forming an opinion.
Yeah. I think the launch of ChatGPT like completely changed the not the way that we work, but who's interested in our work. So I think I very much felt like pre-launch of ChatGPT, and then all, of course, like the downstream effects that created with the launch of Google's Bard, all the competitor tools, et cetera, et cetera. That prior, or post that launch, we started seeing just a bunch of different folks that were not talking about AI before being interested in ways that they could potentially get involved. I think, ultimately, when you think about accessibility and equity around large language models and generative AI. The accessibility is a whole lot greater, as I mentioned a bit earlier, compared to traditional AI models. And I think also when we think about the ways, I often felt like my work was very much, I was in this corner of the company doing my AI work, only speaking to AI and ML engineers, and AI policy folks. And now I think very broadly, there are folks all across the company that are thinking about ways that we can lean into this AI first narrative. I think as you mentioned very importantly around the responsibility aspect in creating accessibility, I think it's something that we're constantly going to have to wrangle with, not just responsibility, not just accessibility, but responsibility, right? And I think, not just as a philanthropy, but also as Google broadly, we're thinking about what it means to toe the line of being bold in our product solutions, in our grant making, but also responsible and inclusive, right? And I think in order to achieve that, I think there needs to be a bit of overcorrection that needs to happen. So I think, going back to what I said earlier, I think that's one of the things I'm really excited to delve into a bit more. Have delved into this year, but hasn't been announced yet. And then we'll delve into quite a bit more, thinking about ways that we seed fund, that we build capacity, that we build exposure, that we develop and raise up curriculum around AI and large language models specifically. And I think there's more to come there.
Other questions?
Good morning. Congratulations on your initiative. It sounds successful and it's very inspiring. My question is, you mentioned Google support for a lot of organizations in India. Is that a coincidence that you brought it up, or do you find that Indian organizations are more geared towards social responsible tech companies?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for it. I think there's some recency bias because Google for India was just last week, and I had to announce a couple of my grants there. But I think as you think about, there's this other initiative that I worked on in 2021 and 2022 called our AI for Social Good workshop, which is funding for organizations that have nascent or no AI capacity, but have existing data collected, a part of their organization that is ready and able to be leveraged for the implementation of AI. So these NGOs apply alongside AI academics, or they apply separately. We do some matchmaking. They then talk about opportunities to leverage AI. And in the very first iteration of that workshop back in 2021, we were focused on organizations. Regional focus was APAC and SSA, Sub-Saharan Africa. And in that open call, overwhelming majority of applications did come from India. We had lots of representation from elsewhere, but I will say, I think as far as this space goes, of course, there are plenty of organizations in the Americas, specifically in the U.S., Canada, that propose these AI solutions. But I think when we're speaking specifically in the APAC region, India is very much way ahead when it comes to thinking about AI and tech solutions. But I think to this question around building capacity and thinking about ways that we can seed fund organizations that are outside of India to be able to leverage this technology at a later time. It'll require more investment, of course, in those surrounding countries. And that's investment that we've already started. And I think will be a natural progression from what right now is our digital responsibility work, right? So that work is very much focused, as you think about emerging markets all across APAC, about teaching folks about how to be responsible citizens online, right? Lots of folks coming online for the first time, thinking about ways that you can equip them with the tools, the knowledge that they need to stay safe online. And I think a natural progression in that work is thinking about ways that AI can not only be a tool for those folks that are coming online, but also is a topic, a technology that we can create literacy around.
There's a question down here.
Thank you, and thank you for this talk. Question about taking the example of the Indian company that's developing or organization that's developing technology to recognize pests. That's an enterprise that could be commercialized. So is success for you having them, because there is a question of access, getting them the capital they need to build a successful enterprise and commercialize this technology, or another way to look at it from a philanthropic perspective is for them to develop something that's open source that could then be available. So how do you prioritize, or how do you think about that choice?
Yeah, it's a great question. So while we're primarily focused on funding nonprofits, I think it's a great point that a lot of these AI solutions could be commercialized, but the organizations that we fund often, like us, are really hoping for the solutions that they create to be raised up as accessible public goods in a sort, right? When you think about agriculture in India, or that particular solution, cotton ACE, and the other crops that will soon be added, the goal is not just to use AI to detect pests, then provide the necessary recommendations to advise farmers to how to treat those pests, but also thinking about how this really creates the downstream impact of increasing crop yield and ultimately economic opportunity for farmers, right? So I think in a way, these public goods, whether it's that particular solution or any other AI solutions that we fund, are meant to be public, of course, but also accessible. And I think often the reason for them being nonprofit solutions is so that folks that really don't have the capital to be able to potentially access a for-profit solution have the access that they need in order to still benefit, in this case, from an AI solution.
Can I ask a follow-up? I thought that was a very insightful question, because I was thinking exactly the same thing when you had mentioned this example, and that, like, why isn't there a patent for this? Why aren't they kind of licensing this technology? Because capital that's gained from those kinds of activities could be reinvested in scaling the solution as well. So that's a market-based solution. So my question to you is that you've been very clear about the kinds of organizations that you prefer to fund, but in your time working with Google.org and your other experiences, have you had experiences of, ooh, I wish I would have done something differently there, that you apply to how you think about funding and choosing and prioritizing now, in the sense that what lessons have you learned along the way that have affected your direction now in terms of directing these initiatives?
Yeah, I think, going back to what I had shared earlier about sourcing organizations that might not have been a fit for funding previously, but could be a fit for funding now or in the future. There are so many organizations that are looking for philanthropic investment. And I think there's also just lots of diamonds in the rough, right? And I think lots of organizations, if provided not just the funding, but also the people capacity and the expertise from our in-house folks, which we do. I didn't get to speak about earlier. We do have like a very committed pro bono assistance program called our Google.org Fellowship, and many other opportunities. But I think one thing I'm going to, be more attuned to, and I think something that I've learned as we think about generative AI and its accessibility, is what are the organizations that have like a really ripe use case for AI, but just don't have the capacity to build up, right? And where can we take more risks around taking bets on those organizations, building that in-house capacity and bringing, our folks, our people, our funding, and our products, our holy trinity, to be able to provide the support needed to scale up those solutions. Yeah.
Other questions? We still have some time for more questions, folks. There's a question up there. Up there.
Thank you so much for speaking with us. This might be a little bit off topic, but you're talking about capital for good in context of AI. There's been a lot of talk about politics the past year, and with AI and freedom of speech and censorship. How is Google championing the ethics approach? And wherever there's capital directed, there's great influence on society and minds, generations. Is there a push for transparency in how that is shaped, how that's governed from Google's perspective, and then the companies that you're also funding and supporting?
Yeah, it's a great question. So any project that we fund, before we fund, we put through a very rigorous AI principles review. So there's an entire team, our responsible innovation team, that reviews every product integration, every new product feature, products holistically that they're red teaming, measuring across a number of benchmarks. We do that very same thing with all of our grants, all of our AI grants. So that's one on the actual day-to-day side of the grant making. But I think more broadly, as we think about responsibility in the space, I go back to regulation, honestly. I think that there are just so many nuanced, beyond just the sort of broader, should we do ethical AI? How do we do it responsibility? Like very high level conversation, the very nuanced conversation about creating model transparency, the very nuanced conversation about why AI makes XYZ decisions, right? Like whenever it's being tested, are, I think, questions that ultimately need universal regulation and standards to which tech companies and individual reviewers, product engineers, AI ethicists can ensure are benchmarked against, right? So I think it's a conversation that I'm glad that government is having more of, but I think part of the challenge also is, aside from government moving very slowly, which gets back to what I was saying earlier, is that there's, I think, a lack of capacity and in-house AI talent within government for folks to be able to quickly identify what are the needs, what are the standards and frameworks that they can establish that are applicable to companies that are leveraging, creating, building these AI models behind these products. And I think, there's even beyond that, as we think about sort of the potential regulation and the promise of regulation, one of the things that we've launched this year was a $20 million AI responsibility fund, to ensure that, the right thinkers, whether they be think tanks, universities, are convened together independently, thinking about what are some of these frameworks that they can create, right? What are proposals that they can, give, the world broadly to governments beyond that we can all potentially learn from. Hopefully, I think that work can serve as a catalyst for inspiring some thinking. I think in this way, Europe is very, very much ahead of anything that's going on in the US around AI regulation. And I think I'm really excited to see how that regulation there continues to progress and what are the opportunities to potentially borrow some of those frameworks in the US and more broadly, of course.
I think we have time for one more question.
So I guess like traditionally, when it comes to solving for social issues, there tends to be a tension or a trade-off between efficiency and equity. So I'm just wondering like how you think these AI-based solutions are able to kind of toe that line or think about those trade-offs.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So going back to AI has immense promise, but AI isn't for everything. I think AI is really great at scale, right? Humans are really good at nuance, right? At understanding context, at empathy, right? Like all of the things that like humans are good at. I think it's important that we think about whether it's AI in the business sense or AI in the grant making sense, that whenever there is potential for AI leading to displacement, that there are opportunities or considerations for what future of work might be for those displaced. And where are the opportunities for AI to save humans from doing menial tasks, right? And that opportunities for AI to engage in scale and free up capacity for humans to do more interesting, challenging work that AI hasn't or isn't best positioned to respond. So I think, this conversation also, I think what you're also getting at is just this broader conversation about future of work and what it means. I think it's something that we've been wrestling with in-house, and I can't say I have a really good answer to, because frankly, we don't know quite yet, like, which jobs will be, which job displacements, which sectors job displacement will be most rampant. So I think part of it is also observing the ways that AI is able to free up human capacity and thinking about ways or opportunities for leveraging human capacity, deploying human capacity in ways that are strategic and more valuable, both for humans, but I think also just more broadly in a societal sense. I think it's a great question and one I continue to wrestle with.
I think I'm going to steal a little bit of what you just said in my class on Tuesday, because one framework that I think about a lot is what makes good decisions, and how I've thought about decomposing it is two factors. One is information, which results in predictive accuracy, and the other is judgment. And I think what you're saying is that the more predictive accuracy we get, the more important judgment becomes. And that's very much goes to the heart of it. So thank you so much for being here, Karla. We're so excited to have the opportunity to learn from you. If you could stick around during the networking break that we have, folks, maybe you can have the chance to interact with Karla. So thank you so much.